Hi everyone, my name is Cindy Lee and I'm an account manager at TechSoup Canada. Thank you for joining today's webinar on Google Analytics with David Bird of Bird's Eye Marketing. First, we'd like to acknowledge this sacred land on which the TechSoup Canada office operates. It has been a site of human activity for 15,000 years. This land is the territory of the Huron-Wendat and Petun First Nations, the Seneca, and most recently, the Mississaugas of the Credit River. The territory was the subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Iroquois Confederacy and Confederacy of the Ojibwe and allied nations to peaceably share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. Today, the meeting place of Toronto is still the home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island, and we're grateful to have the opportunity to work in the community on this territory. Before we get started, I'd like to quickly introduce you to TechSoup Canada. Our mission is to help nonprofits to use technology effectively, and we accomplish this in two ways. The first is to make technology products more affordable to charities through our technology donations program. We partner with tech companies like Microsoft, Adobe, and Symantec and offer their products as either an outright donation or at a significant discount. Membership is free and it gets you access to donated and discounted software from more than 30 tech companies. Through this program, we've helped to connect over 42,000 nonprofits to $422 million worth of technology. The second way we try to help nonprofits use technology effectively is by creating and curating nonprofit tech resources. We write blogs, curate content on social media, and host events and webinars like this one to help nonprofits learn more about the technologies that can help them in their day-to-day work. So if there is a topic you'd like to learn more about, please let us know. We're always eager to get feedback from our members and incorporate that into our work. For today's webinar, you can ask questions in the Q&A box. Just know that you are on mute, so if you want to chat with us and answer polls, just change your audio settings using the control bar at the bottom of the screen and use the Zoom panel to do so. At the end of the webinar presentation, we will be having a Q&A session. So if you have any questions or concerns, feel free to chat with us there. This webinar is being recorded and we'll upload it to our website shortly. We're also working on making our webinars more accessible to our members' diverse needs. So for today's webinar, we'll also be sharing a link to a transcript or text version of this presentation on our website. We are working on including live closed captioning and audio description in the near future. We'll keep you updated on those. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker for today, David Bird. David Bird is the founder and principal at Bird's Eye Marketing, an Ottawa firm that specializes in getting not-for-profits and other organizations found on Google. He has been managing Google Ads, formerly AdWords, accounts since 2012 and is a recognized digital advertising and promotion expert. David is certified with Google Ads with specializations in search, display, and mobile advertising. He also has a Certificate of Achievement in Web Analytics from the University of British Columbia and has completed coursework in e-marketing with the Canadian Marketing Association. Now we are ready to start the presentation and we'll switch the screen over to David.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming to today's webinar. What I'm going to talk about today is uncovering your secrets that are within your website. So I have a small company, Bird's Eye Marketing, and I specialize in getting businesses found and organizations found on Google. Now, Google Analytics doesn't help you get found, but it sure does help you learn a lot about what people like and don't like about your website. And what we're going to cover today are things that are pretty important to you. And the reason that Google Analytics is one of my favorite tools is it helps us discover these three things. Where did your website visitors come from? So you spend money perhaps on advertising, maybe you're investing a lot of time in social media promotion. You want to understand how that is helping you. You often want to know, once people get on your website, what did they do? What pages did they look at? What buttons did they click? What did they do? And through their silence of not going on to certain pages, maybe they're telling you they didn't use that page. So we're learning more about what our customers, where they're coming from, and what they like and what they don't like. The most important thing that Google Analytics can tell you, though, is, are people doing what you want them to do? You've built a website to help advocate for your cause, and you want people to do things like donate money, maybe become a volunteer, sign up for your email list, or just plain engage with your website to learn more about your cause. So these are just some of the things that you might want people to do. And as we go through this presentation, I want you thinking a lot about what you want people to do when they get to your website. It sounds like a silly question, but I really want you to think about that. And as we go through, you'll see why. So today, what we're going to talk about is reading the reports. We're going to look at a couple of reports, and I'm going to show you what some of the terminology means and how to use it. We're going to spend a lot of time on goals and why you should set them up and the power they can bring to you. And then we'll talk a little bit about events as well. So I want to tell you about my first encounter with Google Analytics, because this is a very powerful experience and shows you the power of the data that you're getting and what you can do with it. I was working for a small company, and I was in marketing, and my job was to find sales leads on the web. And I had a $300,000 marketing budget. Now that's a lot of money, a lot of money. In fact, it was 10% of the company's revenue. And just to put that in perspective, most businesses spend 1 or 2% of their revenue on marketing. We were spending 10% on marketing. And the reason was we had a really bad website. It was just awful. There were schema diagrams on the home page. The navigation didn't work. Links often didn't work. You couldn't get from one page to the next. It was a real problem, and it was ugly to look at. One of the sales reps even called it the boil on the buttock of the internet. It was that bad. And the sales force for a couple of years have been trying to get the owner of the business to change it. I was trying to get the owner of the business to change it for like a year, 2 years. He wouldn't do it. His son developed the website. So he had this emotional bond to the website through his son. And this went on, and a few months later, a new VP of sales was hired. Her name was Michelle, and she brought me into her office and asked me, what is going on? Why is this happening? Why can't we change the website? And we got to show him what's going on. She opens up this tool called Google Analytics, and she starts to ask me, when did we do this advertising campaign? When did we do this trade show? When did we do this social media campaign? When did we do this? When did we do that? And what Michelle was really doing was mapping the marketing activities to these huge spikes in website traffic. So we were getting a lot of people on the site. The problem was they were leaving. They'd look at the site and they'd leave. And there's a metric in Google Analytics called a bounce rate. And the bounce rate is the percentage of people who look at one page and they leave. So I'll go through a bit more about the bounce rate later. But we had a bounce rate of over 90%. So virtually everyone who came on the website was leaving. Michelle and I get up and we walk down to the owner's office. And she tells him that, look, we have to stop spending all this money with David. It's a complete waste of money. We need to stop. She shows him the Google Analytics and how people are leaving coming to the website and they're leaving. And this took about 10 minutes. And all of a sudden, and she said, and the owner leans back in his chair, he crosses his arms and says to us, okay, go make a website. Just involve my son so he can learn. This is a powerful story because it took her 10 minutes to change his mind. I couldn't do it in a year, and the sales force couldn't do it in 2 years. Because we were talking with an opinion. Michelle was talking with a hard fact, numbers that were saying, this is what's happening to your business. You can choose to do whatever you want about it, but this is what's happening. So it was a very important lesson for me, and it kind of shows you the power that this data can have to make things happen. So I'd like to have a poll question put up now. And I'd like to know how many in the audience have Google Analytics right now on their website. So we'll just give everyone a few minutes to fill that in. And then if we get, I don't know if the results can be shown to us or not. Are we able to show the results?
Hi, David. I'm just trying to actually show them now. They should be available. Let me know if they're available there.
They are.
Perfect.
Okay, so a lot of people have it. That's good. And there's a few that don't know. You're going to want to know after this, and then some who don't. So I'm going to close the results now. And for those that don't have Google Analytics, I'm just going to take the next 2 slides to talk about how to install it, because it's really easy to put it in. You go to google.com/analytics. There'll be a registration form that's pretty short. You fill that in, and Google's going to provide you with what's called a tracking ID. The tracking ID is a number that what it looks like, how you identify it is it'll have a UA-1, and then it'll end with another -1. You're going to need that number to install it. So there's 2 ways that you can install Google Analytics on your website. It needs to go on every single page of your site. If you have a technical person on staff or available to you, you can install it directly into your HTML code of your website. I suggest, if you're going to do it this way, have a technical person do it. It needs to go on every page of the site. They will know how to do it.
Hello, David. I'm not sure if you can hear me, but the audio has stopped.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. I'd also like to say we've been receiving some feedback about the presentation format, and some people find the preview of the next slide a little bit distracting. I was wondering if you
Sorry, I
would.
didn't know that was on there. Okay, I can change that.
So I think we just lost audio a couple minutes, no, sorry, a couple seconds ago. It was on this slide.
Is that better?
Yeah, perfect.
Sorry about that.
It's okay.
Very sorry about that.
Okay, handing it back over to you.
Okay, sorry about that, everybody. Okay, so to install Google Analytics, you use that tracking ID, you put it into your plugin, and it will um, the plugin will install it across all of your website pages. So the good news is, you've installed Google Analytics. It is actually picking up data, will begin picking up data almost immediately and giving you information. So I want to go into a little bit about the reporting and how to read some of the reports that are available to you. There are four main areas in the left-hand menu, which those of you who have Google Analytics will know that the main menu is always on the left-hand side. There's four areas that are the primary areas: the audience, the acquisition, behavior, and conversions. So this is just a summary to tell you what each of the four areas are and what they mean. But I want to go into a couple of them and just review some of the main points about them. We're going to start with the audience overview report. This is a report that just gives you information about the overall high-level information about the people who are coming onto your website. You're going to see terms like users. So a user, think of that as a person. That's an individual on the site. Another term you'll see is sessions. Sessions is the number of times the site was visited. So you might have, for example, 3 users, but 4 sessions. So one of the users came to the site twice. So you usually, generally speaking, you will have more sessions than you will users. The next one is page views. This is the number of times that the pages were viewed on your website. And then finally, you have about the bounce rate, and I'll talk about that again in a moment, which is the percentage of users who looked at one page and they left. There's a summary of all the metrics that I just talked about. I believe this presentation will be made available to you after, so you can come and look at this page to get the detailed information. So I want to talk about the bounce rate, because this is a pretty important metric. The first thing to know about the bounce rate is that, before you start judging whether it's good or bad, you need to have 500 page views, because that makes sure that you're not going to skew your data, or that your data is not skewed. You have a high enough sample to start looking at it and evaluating it. So a bounce rate between 20 and 65% is pretty good. If you're in that range, don't worry, keep going. If your bounce rate is 65 to 80%, you might want to start to be a little bit cognizant of it, especially as it's pushing towards 80%. You want to start looking at it and understanding what might be going on here. If you're over 80%, you absolutely need to make a change, because your users are telling you they don't like the page. Now, I want you to know that there are a few pages on a website that might have a high bounce rate, and it's okay.
Hi, David. I am not sure why, but the audio sounds like it's gone again on your side.
Okay, how's that?
I can hear you again.
Okay. Sorry about that.
It's okay.
So when your bounce rate is above 80%, when it's acceptable to have a high bounce rate is things like your contact us page. People are usually looking for your phone number or your address, and then they leave the website. So they take that information and they go. You may have a page where you've just got a video on it. You want people to look at it, and then they leave. And that's okay. So remember the purpose of the page before you judge the high bounce rate. At the other end of the spectrum, a low bounce rate is also usually means there's a problem. And most of the time that's a technical problem that has to do with the tracking code. So that one usually takes some investigation by a technical person. It's rare to have a bounce rate that low. Okay, the acquisition report, the overview report. Again, this has some pretty general information. Tells you where your traffic is coming from. It tells you a little bit about what that traffic is doing. And here are the common terms that you will see in that traffic report. Organic search, that's the traffic that's coming from your search engines. And then direct traffic, referrals, paid search is your Google advertising or your Google Grants account. All those different sources. There could be other sources as well. That's just a few of them, for example. The behavior report is the next one that often gets looked at. And this has, again, more information about how many times people looked at your pages, how many unique page views there were, and bounce rate for the pages. So here's the thing. I've shown you some reports, and when you look at these reports, all this information is coming to you, but I always ask, what can you do with it? What does it mean? What decisions can I make as a result of having this information? And the problem with Google Analytics is it's really easy to get lost in the data and lost in all this amount of information that's coming at you. And what tends to happen is we're looking through it and an hour later we're going, wow, that was interesting, but what can I do with it? And what I want to try to get you to do in this webinar is I want to focus you on your goals. I want to go back to that question I asked at the beginning. What do you want people to do when they come to your website? So yes, you installed Google Analytics. Very good, and it is collecting data, but it's collecting very general data that you really can't use to make decisions. And the big mistake that almost everyone makes is they don't set it up. You're not quite done. Just because it's installed and collecting data doesn't mean it's getting you the right information. So what we need to do is a little bit of setup work so that Google Analytics actually works for you and you're not looking at it and going, wow, this is interesting, but what decisions can I make from it? It actually will help you now to make decisions. So Google Analytics has a whole bunch of settings in it, probably in the neighborhood of 150 to 200 different settings. Don't worry, we're not going to focus on all of those. We're going to just focus on one or two of them. But what I'd like to know is, and this is the next poll question, is how many of these settings do you have in your Google Analytics? And what I'd like you to do is check off all the ones you do have. And if you don't know or you don't have any, just check that off because that's okay. So go ahead and launch the poll. And whenever you're ready, just show the results.
Yeah, so people are still answering a little bit, so we'll just wait a few more seconds. Okay, so I think that's it. We'll share the poll results now for you, David.
Oh, good. Good, we have some settings. This is really good. So my hat's off to you guys, because I'll tell you, most times I do these sessions, most of the audience says none. I mean, most of the audience did say none, but a lot more say none than did here. So this is really good. And I'm glad to see some have goals. That's because that's where we're heading next. So I'm going to close the poll results. That's interesting. Okay. So there are the settings again. What we're going to focus on is what I think are the most important, the most important one setting. In other words, if you can do one setting in Google Analytics, this is the one that I would do. It's goals. And why I choose goals is because it helps you identify what your most valuable traffic sources are and what your most valuable pages are. So I didn't use popular, I used valuable. In other words, what are the traffic sources most likely to trigger what you want people to do on your website? What are the pages most likely to trigger what you want people to do on your website? So we're coming back to that question that I keep asking. What do you want people to do on your website? Well, here's some examples of what you might ask people, might want people to do. You might want them to contact you, fill in a form, fill in a volunteer form, or fill in a contact us form. Maybe you want them to email you or phone you, donate money, watch videos, subscribe to your email list, comment on your blog. You know what? You may have others. You may have many things you want people to do when they get to your website, and that's okay. That's good. These are just some examples. So whatever you want people to do on your website, you need to tell, I put that in quotation marks, you tell Google Analytics. Because what you want people to do on your website are your goals to Google Analytics. Now, why go through all this effort? And the reason I want you to go through this is because it then organizes your data around the goals so that you can look at the most valuable pages and the most valuable traffic sources, the ones most likely to trigger what you want to happen. So earlier in the webinar, I told you the story about Michelle and how she got the owner of the business to change the website when I couldn't do it in a year. So several years later, I was working for a much bigger company and I was in marketing. And my job was to get sales leads. And I was told that I had to cut 10% of my budget. And I had to figure out where am I going to get that money from and have minimal impact on the business. So I looked at a whole bunch of data and I talked to a lot of different people. One piece of data that I looked at was Google Analytics. And I concluded that there was some advertising we were doing and some email that we were doing that really didn't appear to be doing much for us. We were spending a lot of money on them and they really didn't seem to be doing very much. So I proposed that we stop them. And I built this really good plan that I took to my manager and she loved it. She thought it was a great plan, great idea. It was going to work really well, well thought out. Then she sent me up to the president and he thought it was a wonderful plan. He loved that it was data driven. It had all the right stuff in it and it was going in the right direction. It's what we needed. And I was feeling really good. And then I went to my team and they liked it. And I went to the sales team and they liked it. I had everybody on board and I was feeling really good about this. And it's a euphoric feeling until the webmaster knocks on my door and his name was Eddie. And he comes into my office, he closes the door and he says, I'm really worried about you stopping that advertising and the email marketing because 1/3 of the leads for this company are going to disappear. And I said, Eddie, come on, stop with the contrarian thinking. Everybody likes the plan. Let's get on with it. Let's execute it. And he says, no, give me 5 minutes and let me explain. And I knew him well enough to know that if I either give him 5 minutes or I argue with him for 20. So So he opens his laptop and he tells me and he shows me in no uncertain terms, I was about to cut off 1/3 of the leads to the company. There was no doubt in my mind or in his mind that it was going to happen. The reason we knew that is because the Google Analytics that Eddie was looking at had goals in it. And what those goals do is they help you make decisions about your website, about your marketing, and about all kinds of other things. In fact, because of Eddie having the goals in his Google Analytics, I was able to identify probably 12 or 15% savings and have no impact on the business. So that's the power of the goals, is they direct our thinking, they direct where we're going, what we're looking at. So I want to get into the reporting again, but this time we're going to look at it with and without the goals. So on the left side of the menu, you have the acquisition, behavior, and conversion. So that's your Google Analytics menu. So I want to start with acquisition. This is how people find your website. So the channel acquisition report. All this report right now is doing is telling us how many sessions or how many people came from each traffic source. That's all it's doing. Now, the thing is, Google Analytics by its very nature is a lot of data and a lot of numbers. Looking at a table like this can be very intimidating. You can change the format of the reports. If you go up in the upper right, when you're on your Google Analytics, you'll see this in the upper right that allows you to change the format of the table. So what I did was I changed it to show me how many people came from each traffic source. That's what we wanted to know. Now what we're looking at is one of my customers' information. And they were approached by a company to spend $2,500 a month on Google advertising. The owner of the business was very excited to do this, very excited, because if you look at this, it's a good decision to do that. Most of the traffic is coming from the paid search, the advertising. So it made sense to go ahead and do that. But when she asked me to do it, to what I thought of this approach of spending this money, I went and looked at the goal. I looked at what does she want to happen on the website and how many times is that happening when this money is spent. The pie chart changed radically. So the next slide I'm going to show you puts the two of them together. So over on the left, you've got it where it's showing a lot of traffic coming in. And on the right, you can see how that blue piece of the pie gets a lot smaller because there's very few transactions coming through. The conclusion is that spending this money was going to actually do no good at all, or very little good. In fact, there was way more benefit in spending that money on a couple of the other traffic sources. And that's what we ended up doing. So here's what happened because of the goal. We were able to make a strategic decision where to apply money because we knew the important thing was the transactions, not the traffic. It's our people doing what we want them to do. And that's where we apply our resources. So a big mistake that's easy to make is to assume that a lot of traffic just means that you're going to get the goal. And I'm asking that you distinguish between the amount of traffic you're getting and is your goal being achieved? And that's what really matters. So we talked about acquisition, how people get to your website. Now I'd like to talk about behavior. What did people do when they got on your website? This is the all pages report. It's a truncated version of it. It's showing which pages got the most views. That's really what it comes down to. And I prioritized it and said, show me from most to least which pages get looked at the most. And there they are. you can't do a lot with this information. Like the homepage, of course, is the top one. And when you see that slash in your reports, that really just means the homepage. You'd expect that to have the most page views, and then so on down the list. But there's something in Google Analytics called goal values. This was originally built for e-commerce sites, but you don't have to be an e-commerce site to use it. So what I do is I put a $1 value on every single goal. And Google is then able to take that and tell you what each page's contribution is to achieving the goal. So when it gives a value of 35 cents to one page and 15 cents to another page, you know the 35-cent page is more likely to trigger the goal than the 15-cent page. So it helps you to distinguish which pages are the most valuable. So what we're doing here is we're saying, now tell me the most valuable pages, the pages most likely to trigger the goal that I want to achieve. And that's what the goal value does. Okay, so we've spent a lot of time talking about why you should have goals. Now I want to get into how you set them up, because this is you're going to spend less time setting up your goals than you are on this webinar. It's really easy to set your goals up. To set them up, you look at your menu on the left-hand side, and at the very bottom, you'll see this little gear icon. That's the administration, and that's where goals live. They live in the administration. You're going to click that, and then this screen is going to open up. It's a 3-panel screen. You're going to go to the far right under View, and there you can see Goals under View. When you click on Goals, this screen is going to come up. And if you're wondering how to add a new goal, it's right there, Add New Goal. You're going to hit that, and this screen comes up. And there's two parts of this screen. The first part is the goal name. You have to name your goal. My advice on goal naming is to use a name that anyone in the organization can understand. You will not be the only person who uses the goal. You don't want people making a bad assumption because they didn't understand the meaning of the goal. So give the goal a clear name that anyone will understand. So within Google Analytics, there's 4 types of goals. I'm going to go through each type now. The first type is a duration goal. This is a measure of engagement, how long people are engaging with your website. So you want to think, how long should someone be on my website before I consider them engaged? Don't spend a lot of time thinking and wondering about this goal. You can always change your goals. They're very flexible. What you're trying to do here is just get used to using Google Analytics with goals. So let's not spend a lot of time worrying about how many minutes and seconds I should consider an engaged visitor. If you don't know, just set it at 2 minutes and save the goal. The next one is another measure of engagement. It's the pages per session. Again, this is how many pages should someone look at before you consider them an engaged visitor. Like the duration goal, don't spend a lot of time thinking and wondering about it. I usually recommend to customers who are starting out with this, set that at 3 pages. If you see later that too many people are achieving the goal, reset it at 6 pages or whatever you want. The point here is to set the goals and get used to using Google Analytics with goals. The third type of goal is called a destination goal. This is a specific page on your website. It might be your donation confirmation or your order confirmation page. It might be a thank you page. It might be your contact us page. And the final goal type is an event goal. Now, I'm not going to spend much time on events at all because they are trickier. And What they are for is they're almost the exact opposite of a destination goal. Sometimes when you click a button on a website, the URL or the page does not change. And when the page does not change, you have what's called an event. So here's the summary of how to set up your goals. You go to the admin, you go to views, and you click on goals. Scroll down towards the bottom and you will see custom. When you click custom, the panel will come up and you'll put a name on the goal, and then you select the goal type. If you click destination, it's going to come up with, it's going to ask you, okay, what is the destination page? Give me the page name, and you will put it in. It's just a copy and paste. The pages per session menu, that's going to, your input there will be a number, 2 pages. Same with the duration goal. It'll be, you can put it in hours, minutes, and seconds. So you'll put 2 minutes. And if you want to be unconventional, you can put 2 minutes and 2 seconds. So you just follow the step for each goal type. You insert a goal value, and I'm suggesting that you use $1 as your goal value, and then click save. You've just set up a goal. So I encourage you to go ahead and do that. So in this session, we have covered a lot of ground. We've talked about a lot of things. We talked briefly about installing Google Analytics and using a plugin. We talked about the reason you should use goals and how you set them up. But the thing about Google Analytics, it's one of those tools that you need to use it to learn it. And that's why I keep saying, just put the goal in. I want you to get used to using the goals looking at Google Analytics with the goals, because it targets what you're looking for. Don't worry, you can't break anything in Google Analytics. I want you to not be afraid, and I want you to start to use it. So to that end, I have a little assignment for you. So by Monday evening, try and have 3 goals set up. Set up a destination goal. And if you can't think of the page that you want to use, just use your Contact Us page. If you want to set up a duration goal. And as I keep saying, just use 2 minutes. And pages per session goal, use 3 pages. On each of those goals, put a $1 value. If you have any trouble at all with it, I want you to call me. A lot of people go, oh, he's brave for putting up his phone number like that. The reason I put it up there is because very few people actually call me because it's so easy to set the goals up. But if you do run into trouble with this, please do call, because some people do. There can be confusion about it. And there's no charge for that. It's just, I make the offer because it's so, I can usually clear it up in a few minutes. Anyways, that's the end of what I had to say. And I'm open for lots of questions if you want to start asking. Are there any questions?
Sorry about that. I had some issue with my own audio, but thank you so much for the informative presentation there. I'm wondering if you could actually take maybe 2 minutes to go back over the non-techie installation method, because the audio went out for a couple seconds.
Yes, I sure can. Just let me take this. Let me take the quick route there. Can you see my screen still? Oh, no.
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay.
We can see your screen now, David.
Can you still see it?
Yes. It's in the presenter mode at the moment.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
That's very sloppy of me. Is that better?
Perfect.
Okay. So I'll go through the installation again. So the first thing you do is you go to google.com/analytics, and there'll be a registration form that you just fill it in. And when you've submitted it, immediately Google's going to give back what's called a tracking ID. And when it comes to installing Google Analytics, you have two choices. They will give you what's called JavaScript, and your developers or webmasters will know what that's for. And this code needs to be installed on every single page of your website. However, many of us are not technical and don't have access to the technical resources. So the easier way to install Google Analytics is actually by using a plugin. So if you use WordPress, Joomla, Wix, Drupal, any of the major platforms, they will have a way to put Google Analytics in. And what they're going to look for is that tracking ID. The way you recognize the tracking ID it begins with UA, a dash, and then it ends with a -1. So I hope that clears it up. I'm sorry that the audio went out on you.
Thanks so much for going back over that. We actually have a lot of questions from our audience that we have compiled.
Okay.
So the first question is, how does Google Tag Manager fit into this? Is that what people should be using for the implementation?
That's a really good question, and that came from somebody who is pretty sophisticated. So Google Tag Manager when I actually install Google Analytics, the way I do it is I actually install Google Tag Manager first. And then within Google Tag Manager, I put the Google Analytics UA number. So that it absolutely is a good way to install Google Analytics. So it's Google Tag Manager. For those of you who don't know, it's free software, just like Google Analytics. But in very simplistic terms, what it does is allow you to track clicks on things like a video, a PDF download, or when someone completes a form, sometimes you get a message that says, "Thank you for submitting your form. We'll get back to you shortly." And basically what's happening is the page is not changing on the website, so Google Analytics won't track it. Google Tag Manager collects data on all the clicks that happen on your website and sends that to Google Analytics so you can see the reporting. So it absolutely is, in my opinion, one of the best ways to put it in. And the reason I don't go into it in this presentation is this is a beginner presentation, and most people just want to get Google Analytics installed, and this is the easier way to do it. But yes, Tag Manager is definitely a viable way to do it, and eventually everybody will get to using Tag Manager.
Thank you for your answer. So I think we have someone more on the beginner side here. We had a poll asking if people had Google Analytics, and some people said they didn't know whether they did have. So this person is wondering, how do they check whether Google Analytics is already on their site?
The way I do it is, if you use the Chrome browser, there's something called Tag Assistant. So if you just Google Tag Assistant for Chrome, it's a plugin that goes in Chrome, and it will it shows up in the top right of your screen once it's installed, the top right of your browser, and you click on that. When you get to a website, you can tell if what is there, if Google Tag Manager is there, Google Analytics is there, or whatever, or any other tagging software. So again, that product, it's free, and it's called Google Tag Assistant, and it's a Chrome plugin.
Okay, perfect. We're moving on to some questions about bounce rates.
Okay.
This is a very specific question. Some folks involved in this organization want them to get a new website, but they see that their bounce rate for their current website in the last month is around 40%. Are they maybe better off keeping the site?
I wouldn't use bounce rate as the judge of whether you change a site or not. What you want to know is, are people able to find what they want? Are they able to get what they need? How are people using the website now? Those are the criteria that you want to use. Is the website modern? Bounce rate, I mean, the example that I gave in this presentation, it was very simplistic, but it was very dramatic, the change it brought. With a 40, if you tried to make a case with a 42% bounce rate, and that was the only criteria you gave me, I would say, no, don't develop a website. That's a lot of money. Whereas you want to look at the site and see, are you attracting traffic? Is it optimized to attract traffic? Are people finding what they want? Are people doing what you want them to do? And what's blocking them from doing what you want them to do? It may not be the answer you wanted to hear, but in my opinion, I think you have to look at much bigger than that for getting a website.
That's great to know. Speaking of more modern websites, a lot of modern websites are one-pagers. How does that maybe impact the bounce rate, and what's an acceptable bounce rate for a one-page website?
Yeah, one-page website where you're scrolling down, you will get, I mean, you're going to have 100% bounce rate. So you have to ignore the metric. So one solution could be, and it's a little bit of a technical solution, install Google Tag Manager, which we talked about just a few moments ago. Put that on your website, and within that, there's something called a scroll tracker. And it will track how much scrolling people are doing on the page. And you can use that to define your bounce rate. So if they scroll less than half of the page, you can consider that a bounce. And you can you can then set your what you want your bounces to be. That is a very involved process, but it can be done.
Okay, and how did you determine the bounce rate categories that you showed? Does it depend on industry?
No, it's just, if you talk to me, you're going to get that answer. You talk to somebody else, you might get a slightly different answer. It's based on my experience when I've seen from websites. I just know that an 80% bounce rate, usually I'm looking at a pretty bad website, whereas something in the 50-40% range, I'm looking at a pretty solid site that it's easy to get around. I want to go to the next page. So they're rules of thumb. That's why the ranges are as wide as they are.
Mm-hmm. This is a pretty granular question that we have. I'm not sure if you can speak to it, but do you know how Google Analytics is able to determine that a customer came from something like a trade show?
That's what's called offline tracking. So it's kind of like, yeah, you were at a trade show, you were displaying, and did they come from that? There really isn't a way to track that accurately, short of giving them a specific website address that is, say, my website / a trade show. And they have to put that in exactly, and then you will know if they came from a trade show, that they came from that trade show. It's kind of like a retailer who they want to track how their website is pulling traffic into the store. It's almost impossible to track. One thing you can do is use dates, how short after the trade show was it. But no, this is not a good tool for tracking that.
Okay, good to know. I just want to give you a heads up that we've spent around 5 to 7 minutes on the Q&A right now. You mentioned before that you're happy to go over 5 minutes. Is that still the case?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Okay, perfect.
I have time, so go ahead.
For other people that may have to leave because lunch is over, you can continue to view the Q&A in the recording. It will be in the recording that's uploaded tomorrow on the TechSoup Canada website. And back to questions.
Can I stop sharing the screen?
Oh, for sure.
Okay.
So for one of the questions, what does it mean when there are two different entries, one with a trailing slash and one without? For example, they gave /program and /program/.
There's no difference.
Okay, that was a very succinct answer. Can you set up different goals for different audience segments? They're picturing here that there might not be that much overlap between their clients, volunteer, and donor audiences.
Not really. No, you have to set the goals are set site-wide. So once you set the goal, for instance, for your Contact Us page, to land on that page, that's going to apply to everybody, regardless of what audience they're in. You can then segment your audience and then look at how many from the audience achieve that goal. That's how I would do it.
Okay, and if a member is maybe using an outside client to collect email addresses with an embedded sign-up form on their site, can they link that confirmation page as a destination goal?
Well, so that's what happens generally with MailChimp. Most people are using MailChimp. And so I fill in my email address on your form and it takes me to the MailChimp page. And when you get to the MailChimp page, it's you're on a different website. So your website is not tracking that. It's now being picked up on MailChimp. So you're not able to track it. What you can do is use Google Tag. That's an example where you can use Google Tag Manager to track the clicks on that button. But it cannot track for you the number of people who sign up. And the reason is you are actually on the MailChimp website and not on your own.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of buttons, there is one audience member that is using a Canada Helps button to collect donations from their website. Would the best tracking method for that be events goal?
Actually, what you can do with Canada, it would be, but again, you're not on your own website. You're actually on Canada Helps website. Now, the really good thing about Canada Helps, and my hat's off to them because they've done a very good job, is you can actually have your Google Analytics set up to go in with the user and you're tracking them on Canada Helps. So there is a way to do that. And Canada Helps has set that up, has enabled that. So you're following the users right into their donation and through their donation.
Mm-hmm. This question circles back a little bit to the setup. Are there any plugins that you would recommend for the WordPress content management system?
Oh, there's so many, and they're all good. There's so many good ones. What I look for in the plugin is, has it been downloaded and used a lot? Does it have good reviews? Some of the other things that you might want in it is the ability for the plugin to filter out administrative users. But most of them they're all good. But those might be the features I would look at. Filtering out administrative users, make sure it's got a lot of users, and that it has some good reviews.
Mm-hmm. It's good to know that there are a lot of good ones out there. Once you have set up some goals in your Google Analytics, how do you check your progress towards those goals?
You go in and look at the reports, and you will see how you're performing. So let me, if I can, I'm going to share my screen and show you some examples of that, because that is a good question. Okay, let me find, sorry, I'm going to
I'm just seeing a related question here. One of the attendees didn't understand the dollar amount for each goal. So maybe you could address this one as well.
Okay. So, let me just show you. Okay, let me go into presentation mode. Okay. So here's an example of using the goals. That was the question, I believe. So this customer was thinking of spending $2,500 on Google advertising, which is what paid search is. And over here in the blue section of, I'm just going to use this little pencil here. So right here over in this part, right? Okay, sorry. So in the big blue area on the right-hand side, that's without a goal. That's just telling you and how many times people came to the website from the paid search. 43% of the time. So that's not terribly useful because that's just the traffic. That's the number of people who came. And you'll go, so what to that? So instead what we say is, okay, tell us how many times we had a transaction or a goal was achieved from that traffic source. And the difference is that we're looking at the one on the right, or sorry, the one on the left is without the goal. The one on the left is with the goal. And you can see that it becomes the goal is not being achieved very frequently for this particular traffic source. Whereas if you look at the orange segment on both pie graphs, you can see that not much traffic is coming through there, but wow, are there ever a lot of goals being achieved? 50% is achieved through that traffic source. So that is a very strong traffic source. That's how you use the goals. I hope that answers the question.
I think that's a great answer to that question.
Another follow-on question about the
dollar amounts for each goal. What does that mean?
So what Google's done is it's rather a complex algorithm. But basically, they're looking at all the traffic going through all the pages on a website. And they're saying, this page, people who went through this page, or page A, for example, did not achieve the goal very often. Whereas people who went through page B achieved the goal a lot. So page B is way more valuable to you. And because you've put a dollar value on that goal, you've said, this goal is worth $1. Now Google can evaluate every single page that people use to get to that goal and put a dollar value on it. I try not to get into the mechanics of how it works because that's not terribly important. What's really important to understand is the result. If you put a $1 value on the goal, if it has a higher number than another page, then the page is worth more money, is worth more, and has a higher chance of achieving the goal. And so what it's telling you is your most valuable page. To get into the mechanics of how that works would take a long time. But it's looking at the contribution each page is making towards achieving the goal. I know that's not a terribly good answer, but in the time I have, that's the best I can do right now.
Mm-hmm. We have one question about whether the goals will go back in time and track the history of the website, or are they new from the day that it's set up?
They're new from the day it's set up. Unfortunately, it's not retroactive.
Okay. Another kind of time question. How far back I think that's the same question. Does it keep your site's data? I believe they were trying to get at the same thing.
Yeah, well, I think that question is, the first one was about the goal and when it starts collecting the data for the goal. And then the other question might be for how far back, once I have Google Analytics, how far back will it go?
Mm-hmm.
Google Analytics will keep the data for as long as you've had Google Analytics on your site. So if you put it on your site in 2006, you have data going back to 2006. However, if today you put the goal on, you're only going to see the goal data from today.
Okay. And a lot of people are asking for more guidance on these goals, like what titles might you suggest, or if there are guides out there that you might recommend?
There's a lot of good stuff on the internet, but really it's as simple as pick your contact us page, pick a page on your website, and put that URL into the goal setup. I always worry when I do these presentations that people are going to think too much. Your objective here is to start using Google Analytics with goals. Remember, you can always change it. So I always suggest just put your contact us page in. Just set it at 2 minutes. Just set it at 3 pages. And then start using it. Your natural curiosity will really start to kick in, and you will change those goals and you will add new ones. So focus more on just setting it up. And as you're going, go through the process of setting them up, just like I showed you in the presentation. It is that easy, and just go through it. And honestly, to spend time sweating and worrying about what goal to use, it's not worth it. Just set them up and then change them in a month or modify them. But get used to using this data with goals, because it's going to change how you look at Google Analytics.
Okay, I think we're getting up to almost 10 past, so I think we'll end it there.
Okay.
That's pretty much all the time we have for today. I want to thank you again, David, for sharing your knowledge with us and going over even above and beyond in the Q&A session.
Oh, thank you. Thank you guys for coming.
Yes, thank you everyone for taking time out of your day to join us in this webinar. Just a reminder that we'll be posting the webinar recording to our website by tomorrow. Also, please fill out the brief post-webinar survey that will launch after this session. You can reach out to us if you have any questions at yasmin@techsoupcanada.ca. And I believe David's also willing to share his contact information, which is david@birdseyemarketing.com, if you would like to reach out directly to David for more Google Analytics questions. So thank you and have a great rest of your day, everybody.